Madeline, what's up? Welcome to Dad Edge.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. This is after almost 1,000 episodes, I've never had a guest quite like you.
Well, I'm honored.
Well, let's set the stage correctly here. So you're not a dad, correct?
Correct. I am not a dad.
But
I
you have
am a
one,
daughter. Yeah,
right?
I am a daughter of a dad who has three girls. So I have two younger sisters, and he is quite the girl dad.
I would guess so. And just for some context too, because before you and I hit record, I mean, we were just going through, just getting to know each other a little bit. And I was just, to be honest with you, I mean, obviously you're a very humble person, and maybe don't take compliments all that well. But as you were talking, I was like, my gosh, I was like, this girl just seems wise beyond her years, and the things that you've already done. You're 25 years old and have already written this book.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think honestly, I owe a lot of it to my dad and the way he raised me and helped build my confidence and taught me that I can go out there and do whatever I want to do. And so this was something that I decided one day I want to write a book called Girl Dad. And fast forward 2 years later, I did it. So it feels good.
Okay, so I that's the first thing I want to hit on is how your dad believed in you and maybe helped you lead yourself with developing your own confidence. I want to start there, but before we start, do you want to start with some fun warm-up questions?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So in your spare time, when you're not starting businesses, like you were telling me, writing books, what do you like to do that brings you joy?
I love going on walks. I do it every morning. I get up and I go for a walk and listen to podcasts. I just find that it's really inspiring and motivating to start my day with learning about, different people starting businesses or things that they appreciate in life. And it's just, it's really great. And then I also love working out. I've recently started weightlifting, which was a whole new challenge that I had never explored and never thought I would ever touch. But it's been really rewarding and fun. And I love cooking as well. So I would say, an ideal day would start with a walk with some podcasts, grab a matcha, do some work. I honestly love to work, and then go to the gym, cook a nice meal, and maybe watch TV or hang out with friends.
All right, perfect. So what's your favorite thing to cook?
Ooh, I have this Cajun maple salmon recipe that is just
Well, now you got
amazing.
to share that. You got to
Oh
share the
yeah,
recipe now.
I will. Yeah, it's so good. And then I make this famous salad. It's like the Air One salad that has maple syrup in the dressing. That's the secret recipe. People call me Elf sometimes. Like,
That's what I was thinking.
yeah, maple syrup is the secret ingredient to literally everything that I cook. But yeah, it's great.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, that does sound good. So, okay. So Cajun salmon and this magical salad. So
Yeah.
when it comes to, and obviously, you know, you're very active, that kind of thing. When it comes to what you're watching these days, what's your go-to series these days?
Ooh, I've been watching Game of Thrones for the first time.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of the nightly, like, one episode. And I'm a little bit too emotionally invested. There was an episode last night that was traumatizing and I was sobbing because it's like you like love these characters so much. And then all of a sudden, things happen and it upsets you. So
Yeah.
I won't say anything else because I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, it's a good show.
Well, I think I'm one of like 7 dudes on the planet who hasn't started that yet. Game of Thrones, but I'm
Yeah.
also raising 4 boys. So my TV time is super limited. Usually the TV time I do get is when I'm passing out uh, in my bed. Like
Yeah, it's totally fair.
I literally turn on TV so I can switch off my mind so I can go to sleep. My wife always nudges me. She's like, "It lasts like 5 minutes before you fall asleep. Why do you even turn the TV on?" I was like, "Because that's literally all I need."
Yeah, that's amazing.
So you wrote this book called Girl Dad, and it sounds like from your experience growing up that you had a really positive experience growing up with your own father. And what was the inspiration though? I want to take you back to the moment where you're like, you know what? I actually want to put this on paper and I actually want to write a book about this. What was that moment like?
So that exact moment, I was actually just driving in the car. I have some of my best thoughts when I'm just driving, and I thought to myself, I should write a book called Girl Dad. It kind of just came out of nowhere. I wish it was more of like this aha moment, but I was like, I should write a book called Girl Dad. And that is not very typical for the way people write books, right? You kind of write your story and then you think of a title that relates to that story, but the title was what created the story for me. And so I just kind of started writing. And as I was writing this story, which originally was these, lessons from my dad that he taught me and my daughters or me and my sisters as we were growing up, I realized that, he's an incredible dad and he's got all this advice and all these lessons, but there's so many other dads out there that are also great and have great relationships with their daughters. And so I wanted to expand the book and I started interviewing a bunch of dads and a bunch of daughters and got all kinds of perspectives on how to be the best father to daughters. And ultimately, that's the purpose of the book. It's to help teach dads how to have great relationships with their daughters, how to speak the daughter language, and in turn, how to allow girls everywhere to have kind of special relationship that I have with my daughter, because I think it really has impacted me and my little sisters so much more than we even know. And I want that for everyone.
So this is why I really wanted to have you on, because we've had professionals like Meg Meeker, right, who wrote Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, right? And the cool thing about Meg is that she wrote that book from a very high level of seeing, like, being a pediatric physician for so long and seeing the role a dad plays in the daughter's life. She also did share stories in that book of what it was like and the benefits that she got by her own dad, who is an amazing man, right? But the premise of the book was more what she saw through her practice, not necessarily how she grew up. And that's why having you on the podcast, I was so intrigued to have you, because I was like, man, this is like literally through the lens of a little girl with her dad going through all the stages, right? From like little girl to adolescent to tween to teen and young adult, right? And now reflecting back on these things. Where I really want to start is where you started. It's with this confidence thing. And I got to be honest with you, Madeline. We're going to talk about how men can be better about leading their daughters, developing their own confidence and their own self-love, especially today. Like I tell my boys all the time, my oldest is 16. I'm like, I don't envy your generation. And he's like, why? I was like, because all I have to do is open up my phone and I'm reminded of how far behind I am than everybody else, because that's what social media kind of puts in our head. And I just had another raising daughter expert come on the podcast to specifically talk about body image issues and confidence and self-love with everything that you guys see on social media. So I am really curious of, what did your dad teach you as far as how to love yourself and be okay with your image and and develop high self-esteem?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough thing. And like you said, it's so important now more than ever. And I think it really comes down to showing up for your daughter and showing her how proud you are of her from a young age, and also teaching her how to be proud of herself. So rather than just saying, I'm so proud of you, which is so important, don't get me wrong, but get down on her level and say, you should be really proud of yourself. And here's why. Or ask her questions like, are you proud of yourself? Or, what do you like about this? Maybe she brings home a piece of artwork, like, what do you like most about this that you just created? Like little comments or little questions that get her thinking about why she should be proud of herself will go so far, especially at a young age when she's just kind of developing the sense of who she is. And I think confidence is, it's so much more than looks, right? But it sets you up for that barrier where if you're on Instagram, you see this beautiful woman, you're not comparing yourself to her and hating yourself for, seeing her beauty, right? Like, who you are. That's your confidence. You're confident in yourself as a person. You love that you are you, and you know that people love who you are because of who you are, not because of what you look like. And teaching values that you find important is great. So if you think, honesty or integrity or resilience are good traits that you want your daughter to have, teach her to be proud of those in herself. And then she'll grow up to realize that that's who she is. And it doesn't matter what other people look like on Instagram, because they're likely edited anyways. And teach her that too, like, don't believe everything you see on the internet. That goes for everything, including other people's Instagrams and what they look like. But just have her know that at the end of the day, she's an incredible person. She's nice. She's honest. She's smart. She's got all these things going for her. And that's what she should focus on, not, does her hair look good? And, I think just showing up for her and being present and saying how proud you are of her will go really, really far.
Out of 1,000 episodes, I haven't heard that piece of advice. And I'm gonna focus in on the piece of advice that I'm talking about here. I think for the most part, dads really want to praise their kids. They want to they take pride in their kids. They want to show how proud they are of our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be honest with you, Madeline, I'm raising boys. One of the things that I have failed to do is to guide them and help them articulate, why are you proud of this? Because I think that there's something really empowering about that, right? It's one thing to be told. It's another thing to make your own reflections on what you did or something that you are proud of and why, because it's like a deposit on the hard drive, right? You're reflecting, you're saying it out loud, and you're sharing it with somebody else in this really cool, safe space. So not only do you get the external, like somebody's proud of me and I'm getting validation, but also I can articulate that myself. But I don't think kids necessarily know how to do that, and maybe daughters as well, especially when they're younger, unless they have a really good dad or a really good parent to guide them through, like, hey, share with me why you're proud of this, because that's huge. I really want to get to this resilience piece, because you brought that, you said the word resilience twice. And in this world, confidence and resilience, like if I ask most men, when it comes to your daughter, what's most important? What are the most important lessons that you want to teach her? Or as she gets older, like you look back and you're like, okay, I did my job. And I will tell you, confidence and resilience is definitely at the top. So resilience is being able to adapt to whatever adversity is being thrown your way, right? Being able to stay calm and being able to make logical decisions and things like that. So I'm curious, like, what did your dad do to help you become resilient?
I think he taught me how to fail. And that was, like I, throughout life, there are many times that I didn't do well in a soccer game or a golf match. And I came home and I was upset. And I think talking about failure openly is really important, and how you deal with it is all that matters. Because when you're not afraid to fail, then you keep going and you're resilient, right? And so I think having conversations around, okay, what are you going to learn from this? How are you going to approach this next time? It only builds their confidence and improves resilience and sets your daughter up for life, because times are tough and she is going to fail. So don't try to shelter her and say, everything is perfect. You're so good. You're great at everything, Teach her that some things are, you can improve on, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love this whole aspect of failure. I mean, the way I was brought up is, and I still think it's true today. I mean, I see it all the time. Like I have two, well, I don't think it's dependent on age, but I see it more with like little kids. So I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I see the parents, like my 9-year-old is doing learn to play soccer right now. This is not even competitive soccer. It's learn to play. And if there's one thing I've learned through some of the experts that have come on the show, is if you are the parent of a youth athlete, your job is to let the coaches do their job, and your job is to support your kids, right? Not to heckle them from the stands, not to coach from the stands, not to have the dreaded backseat lecture of what you didn't do right when you're out on the field, that type of stuff. But what I think is interesting is parents are so terrified to see their kid fail. Like terrified. I think they're more terrified of their kid failing than the kid failing. So I think it's interesting that you were brought up in this in this environment where failure was like, let's talk about it. What'd you learn
Yeah.
from it? That's the exact same way we go about failure in our family. I want to know though, just from a detailed perspective, tell us maybe a story or a time or a situation where you did fail and maybe your dad just guided you through like how to navigate through that and learn from it versus like I'm a failure, right?
Right. I think one example, he wasn't there with me, but it was a high school golf match and I was playing really bad. I started the first hole with a triple bogey and then another triple bogey and another triple bogey. And I had 4 triple bogeys in a row, which is just not okay in my book. And I thought to myself, like, this is terrible. Like, I'm gonna like flunk this match. My score can't be used. We're gonna lose. This is a really big game. And I was going through all these thoughts. And then I took a step back and I thought, okay, what did my dad teach me? Like every stroke matters. The past is the past. You have to pick yourself up no matter what. And you can change like the rest of the game. And so I parred the rest of the holes because I literally like, I just thought about his words. I took a step back. I reflected on it and I was like, that the past is in the past. Like I cannot change that. That was a really big bummer, but what can I do moving forward? And I focused on every shot. I regained my confidence. I wasn't feeling like super down about everything. And then after I got that first part, I was like, look, I can do this. And so I finished the round and my coach pulled me aside and she said, I've never been so proud of you. And I was like, what? Like I had a terrible score, but she saw like the whole, you know, transition and she knew that I was doing really bad. And she saw that I was able to come back and have an average score. But it was my dad in the back of my head and him telling me, you know, how to overcome those days and how to be better and stronger. And yeah, it ended up being a good lesson.
I'm so glad you shared that lesson because it wasn't just a lesson of failure, but it was also a lesson of recovery. And I think that I would much rather see one of my sons or a youth athlete have a really bad game or a bad moment or a bad match or whatever it is, and then be able to somehow recover from it and move forward. And by the way, your golf game is like 10 strokes better than mine, even if the first one. Just laying that out there. You know, I was at my 16-year-old and 15-year-old, they wrestle right now. And I was at one of their tournaments last night. And I love wrestling. I wrestled in high school myself. It's my favorite sport. And I can always tell, it doesn't matter what match I'm watching, whether it's my son's or somebody else's. I can always see it when one of the wrestlers break. Like where something happened and there's no coming back from it. And last night I saw these 2 guys just going at it. And there was one guy and he was actually on our team and he's just jacked. Like he looks like he looks like a bodybuilder. Like he's a scary dude.
Yeah.
And then this kind of more frumpy-ish wrestler came up to wrestle him. And I was like, I looked at him, I was like, this frumpy guy is not going to last. Like it just aesthetically, like he just looks defeated. And this dude put up, like he picked this muscle bound dude up and slammed him on the ground.
No way.
Yeah, he did that. Well, he did this takedown. So he kind of like did this double leg. And, you know, normally they drive right through and take you down, but this guy was fighting him. So he kind of like just lifted him up and just turned him and dropped him.
Oh my God.
Like it didn't like hurt him. Right. But what he did is he kind of like sent a message to this guy. Like, and I saw the muscle bound dude. There was like a look in his eye that he just broke. And
right.
This other guy, it took one more round, but he ended up pinning this guy. But you saw the moment the guy came out all confident. He had won every match up until that last match. And then after that slam, it was almost like he couldn't recover. And that was really fascinating to watch. And I've seen the opposite too, where you see somebody go through a bad moment on the football field or wrestling match or whatever. And they're like, oh man, there's no coming back from that. And suddenly they recover. So, there's something about failure, but there's also something beautiful about recovery. And the other thing that you mentioned there too, is not only did you take a step back and say the past is the past, which my God, that is hard for any human being to let go. But you also asked yourself an incredible question. You didn't step back and go, why can't I play this game right today? you stepped back and said, how can I recover? How can
Hmm.
I, how can I be better? Past is the past, which I think is incredible. Did your dad teach you to take a step back and just simply ask yourself better questions?
I think so. Yeah. I think he did it in a way, or he did it through setting, or sorry, he showed, or he did that with himself. And so I was able to see him ask those questions, and he just set a good example for all of us girls to do that ourselves.
So you saw him do that stuff.
I saw him do that. Yeah.
I love it.
Even when he played golf, like he taught me how to play golf. So I'd be on the course with him, and he wouldn't ever really get upset, like throw his club. Like I never saw that from him. He'd
So
like laugh.
he never
And
had to
then
Gilmore to anything.
no, he was very level headed and was able to recover. And again, he asked questions, and he gave me little quotes to remember, like roll it and hole it, or drive for show, putt for dough. So I would always have these in my head, like, as I was playing.
That is so cool. So yeah, just to kind of recap, number one, you saw the example in your dad
Hmm.
when it came to failure and recovery. Number two, you're able to step back from maybe a situation, even if it's just for a moment, analyze for what it is, forget the past, recover. How do I recover in the future by asking ourselves better questions? I love that. You know, I know you mentioned that you wanted to share some typical girl stuff, right? Some things
Yeah.
that maybe us guys aren't aware of. But before we do that, I want to share a quote with you. And I just want
Okay.
to get your reaction to it because it's a quote that I've heard from other people who've come on the podcast. Is one of the main questions on a daughter's heart is,
Mhm.
am I on her mind and on her heart is, am I worthy of my dad's heart? I don't know that. Obviously, I'm not a girl. Obviously, I don't have girls, but what does that quote mean to you?
I think it's really true, especially at a really young age, but I don't know that we're even aware of it. I think we look up to our dads so much when we're little girls, and we admire them, and we're kind of like, that's my dad. But we don't, we want his love and affection, and we want him to be proud of us. But yeah, and it is really, it's powerful. And when we're young, dads are our heroes, and we want to be like them. We want them to love us, and we want their support. So I think when we get into, how to relate to girls, that'll go a long way, because showing up for her and showing her that you care about her and that you are proud of her, it really goes a long way.
What about in the teenage years? How does that show up? As far as I know, with some girls as they get older, and boys too, they get they come across as maybe less and less interested of having your attention, your love, your affection, even your conversations, right? Um, what do you think, looking back on, your teenage years, is that necessarily true for most girls, like that isn't what they want, or is that just maybe how they think that they should operate, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think we want it and we need it. We like really need it, that kind of support and love from our dads. But oftentimes we will express vocally that we don't want that. And I think it's really just a matter of the teenage years and the hormones and all of that. I think we're, the oldest we've ever been. We're feeling like we're super mature, we're women now, all of this. And really, we just have no idea what's going on in our heads. And we like to sometimes push our dads away. And we're kind of like, okay, like, thanks, dad, whatever. But it's so important that you still kind of say those things, and you're still present, and you're still asking good questions about what's going on in her life, and you're relating to her, and you're making sure that she knows that you're always there for her, and that your relationship is as strong as it's ever been, even if it feels like she's pushing you away. I think it'll, especially if she goes off to college or moves away from home, knowing that your dad is there for you no matter what, it's like, it's magical. It is so important.
I'm really glad you said that. I just had, do you know who Dr. Lisa Demore is? She wrote the book called Untangled, and it's all about raising teenage daughters.
I have heard of that book, but
Yeah.
not super familiar.
So she came on and shared some amazing strategies, right? From like her practice and her book
Uh-huh.
and being a doctor and all that. But the one thing that she didn't share that I'd be really curious to hear from you is, I'm sure that there were stages of your life and being a teenager where you're like, no, dad, I got this. Like, please, like, I don't need you right now for this, like that kind of thing, almost like pushing dad away. Right. But you also mentioned that there's a part of you that so needs that, like so needs that. And I got to
Mhm.
be honest with you, Madeline, there's a lot of men out there that they're just like, I'm so confused of what to do and how to do
Mhm.
it. And when she was little, all I had to do is tell her, I love you so much, princess,
Yeah.
and hug on her and kiss on her and all that and tell her. And he's like, and now when I do that, like sometimes it's maybe a little welcomed. Sometimes I'm just like, dad, you're so annoying. So how do dads strike that balance in
Mhm.
your opinion? Well, and I want you to think about when you were a teenager with your own dad. How do you strike that balance of I just need this much from you? And maybe perhaps I don't know how to tell you that, but these types of things, these one, two, or three things are really meaningful to me, even
Mhm.
if I tell you that they're not.
Hmm. I think if she's really pushing you away, you can show up in ways that aren't like stepping over those boundaries. For example,
Uh-huh.
you can be her silent supporter through little gestures like writing her a note and leaving it in her room. Like she might be like, she might not even ever talk to you about it, right? Like just she might
Yeah.
ignore that even was a thing. But if she reads it and it's super heartfelt and it's about how proud you are of her and how much she's grown and you remember, this about her when she was a little girl, like that's awesome. And that'll go far. And another thing is know your daughter. Try to figure out what her interests are if you don't know already. And then try to incorporate those into whatever the situation is. So like if you know what her favorite ice cream is and she's having a bad day and you can just like drop off, like knock on her door and like hand her a bowl of her favorite ice cream. Or, if she's really into like making her own jewelry or something, like buy her a little jewelry kit and just like give that to her and let her do her thing and step away, but just show that, look, you're paying attention, you're there. And if she ever needs anything as she's going through this difficult time, you're always there for her.
There are three things that are coming up for me as you're sharing this, which by the way, gold, absolute gold. And one is, daughters and yeah, sons too, but they need to feel seen, heard, and safe.
Yes.
And what I think you're telling me is sometimes depending on the relationship and depending on where you're at in the teenage stage and all that, you may not want that seen, heard, and safe like in your face, but you want it like, oh, my dad still sees me, right? He's leaving me a
Mhm.
note, the jewelry kit. He gave me a bowl of his own my favorite ice cream. He didn't even come in and say a word. He just put it down. Things like that, that just like these little deposits, right? Hey, I see you. I hear you. I love you. I'm here,
Right.
right? I'm just here. I had a teenage expert come on and share very similar advice, and I started doing it. And that is when you have a teenager and you see them like studying for something, or they're really stressed or they're really overwhelmed with something and they're in their room and maybe they're working on something, take their favorite snack and their favorite drink and just set it on the desk and kind of put your hand on their back and walk out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did that with my 16-year-old not too long ago. He was just overwhelmed with a Spanish test that he was studying for. And I just popped a bag of popcorn for him and his favorite orange soda. And I just set it next to him. He just stopped what he was doing. He's like, well, what was that for? I was like, I don't know. You look like you're working hard. Maybe you're
Oh,
hungry. And
yeah.
he goes, oh my God, that made my whole day. And I was like,
Aw.
really? And he's like, yeah. And so, yeah, it's just like those gestures that I think most of us dads, it's that maybe that's not on our radar, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's proof of what you just shared that needs to be on our radar. So thank you for that.
Of course. And I think also if you can make a note or, make an effort to be really present at mealtime. So if you guys eat breakfast together or dinner together and it's a routine, make sure it's like a no phone rule and you're really showing up and you're there and you allow a platform to ask questions that are really impactful, not necessarily yes or no questions, but more like discovery questions about their day and what they're working on, what is interesting them at that moment, so that you can learn about them. And also it gives them an opportunity to share some of the things that are not going so well. And maybe you'll realize that there's some advice that you could provide that'll help her, or maybe there's something that you need to do to make her happier or feel better. So I think being present is a present, right? It is a gift, and it is really, really important.
Yeah, especially with this day and age and devices. I mean, it's very, very hard for us to disconnect. We have a hard rule at our dinner table that nobody has devices, and I think that's so important. You got to do that. Even at my age, my dad is in his 70s, and there are times where we'll be talking and he'll be on his phone, and I just feel like the most least, the smallest thing on his radar, right? And here's the other thing too. Calling myself, I've done that to my own kids,
Yeah.
and it's something really that impacts the relationship. It sends a message of, this is more important than you right now. So, as we wrap up here, one of the things that you talked about was work-life integration
hmm
and being able to balance that. And that is something that's really, really tough for us, because just to kind of give you the mind of a man, right? And a husband and a father, it's wired in our DNA to hunt, gather, provide. And when we're not doing those things, we feel like we're not doing our job. We literally, like, there's something instinctual that's happening for us, being like, I should be doing this, or I should be doing more of it. I'm not being a good father by not providing. And that trips a lot of us up because we don't have the boundaries to hold with that one. But as far as looking back on your relationship with your dad, or maybe through the stories of other people you've interviewed, where have you seen the most optimal situation where a dad can work effectively, but also have these boundaries in place where he can also be the father that you had growing up?
I think it all comes down to communication. So honestly, most of the dads that I interviewed were super busy dads who worked at least one job and were really career driven and focused on their career. And my dad was no different. He has always had at least one job, and he's working all the time, and he still is. But he talks openly about his work. And I think doing that is really good for your daughter, especially if you can shed light on some of the positives. Because if she's looking up to you, right, and she sees, oh, my dad is so invested in his work, he loves his job, here's what he loves about it, he works all the time, but he's motivated and driven, then that's inspiring to her to be the same way. But if you are constantly complaining about your job, and you're, and I know like jobs can be tough, and I totally get that. But if you're doing that in front of her and you're teaching her that jobs are, terrible, and it's just super unmotivating for her to see, number one, you're setting herself or her up to think, wow, why do I want to go get a career like
Yeah, I don't
that?
want a job.
That looks terrible. Yeah. And then also you're teaching her that, okay, here's this thing that you don't even like, right? Well, you're putting that ahead of her. How do you think that makes her feel, right? She's second best to this thing that you don't even like. So if you can instead flip it, and you can, talk about the positives or talk about why you work, right? Like you work so hard because you love her so much, and you're putting food on the table, and you're doing this to create a better life for her. That's great. And then also include her in things so that she can understand what she likes and what she doesn't like. My dad talked about his role as an engineer all the time when I was growing up, and I was like, so confused often, but really interested too. And even if he had to work on the weekends, he would take me and my little sisters into the office, and there were like old blueprints that he would give us, and we would like be drawing on the blueprints, or, we got to like go to the vending machine and have gummies, and it was like the best day ever. Like we loved going to work with my dad. And I think it was really cool of him, because he taught us that, we're still super important. And when he wasn't working, he was very present. He made sure to look us in the eyes, talk to us as if we were the most important thing in the world in that moment. But at the same time, he worked really hard, and he told us why he did that and what he loves about his job. And he still continues to do that today. And I come to him for career advice, and we talk a lot about business and ideas and all these things. And I think it's really led to our strong relationship because he was open and communicative.
Madeline, you're awesome. No,
Thank you.
I say that because I thought you were going to give us like some boundaries around work-life integration. You gave us so much more because as you were talking, I was typing, and some of the things that I wrote down were talking about the positives of our job, bringing our kids into that world a little bit. And I think it's really important. Do you know 82% of men who go to a job don't like it?
I think that's so sad.
I know, me too. I think it's really sad. Eight out of 10 men go to a job that they dislike or hate. And what you just said there, I've never heard any other guest share it like you did, of through the eyes of a daughter or even a son, right? It's like, man, if my dad hates what he does so much, number one, why does he do it? Number two, why does he do that for so long throughout the day? And he takes time away from time I could have with him. And why would I want to do that? Growing up, I
Right.
never thought of it that way. But
Yeah.
that's gold. And I love the fact too that he would bring you in for just I remember my mom was married to a guy from the time I was 5 to 10, and he was a data software engineer. And I loved going to work from him. And now, like, I look back on it, I was like, how was I not bored out of my skull? Because like I would like even carry like a little briefcase with me, like I was acting like him. I had a little tie on and stuff like that. And but I loved it. What you just really hit home is bringing our kids into that world a little bit, right? And I'm sure for like, whether you were 8, 10, 12, 13 years old or whatever it was, your dad talking about his engineering job, you're like, what does that even mean? I don't even understand the language. But you appreciated it to some degree.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. Madeline, you're doing really good work in the world. And like I said, I'm going to end this podcast with a quote that I started with, which is, you are an old soul and wise beyond your years. I can't believe you're 25, because the amount of the high quality knowledge that you dropped on us today, these were things I haven't heard from other guests. So thanks for doing that.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to all the dads out there that are tuning in, because showing up and listening to this podcast is already, you're miles ahead of lots of other dads out there. And I think it shows that you're present and you're striving to be a better version of yourself. And that is just awesome. So keep it up. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you bet. Before I let you go, where can men find your book? I mean, obviously it's probably on Amazon, but I know you
Yes.
probably have other resources and that kind of thing that you can connect men to your book, or anything else that you're doing in the world.
Yeah, I would say Amazon is the best place. It's Girl Dad: Stories, Lessons, and Advice from Girl Dads and Their Daughters. And my Instagram is girldad_the book. And girldadthebook.com is the website.
Dang, you even have the website. You even bought the domain.
Yeah, I did.
I'm actually shocked that wasn't taken.
I know, right?
Right. Good for you. Well, gentlemen, you won't have to look far for Madeline, her book, and her resources. I think you'll all agree, if you've been listening to the Dad Edge podcast for any amount of time, the information that Madeline shared today was absolute gold. So like I said, if you want more, head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday86 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday86. Madeline, thank you so much for coming on today. This was a game changer. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here.
Back at you. Gentlemen, go out and live legendary. Take care.